stress, and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in the African American communities, irrespective of income. They discover eating a whole food plant based diet in urban communities is possible and is the key to eliminating health disparities. The Slave Food Project is the brainchild of Dr. Columbus Batiste and Dr. Eric Walsh. Dr. Columbus Batiste is a board certified cardiologist and chief of cardiology in Southern California. Dr. Batiste's mission is to share information so that each one can teach one about the benefits of plant based nutrition, daily exercise, and stress reduction. This mission has led to the formation of a nonprofit organization called the Healthy Heart Nation, which provides education through lectures, newsletters, social, and digital media. Dr. Eric Walsh was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He is a graduate of the University of Miami School of Medicine, Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he received his master's and doctorate in public health. Dr. Walsh has embarked on his own plant based journey and as a result has lost more than 70 pounds by adopting this lifestyle. Dr. Walsh has committed his life to speaking around the globe through his preaching and healing ministries. This week, the Slave Food team explores how nutrition has been bioengineered through the use of salt, sugar, and fat, and its impact on health in America. We welcome Professor Malcolm Speller, who has a Master's of Engineering Management from Northwestern University, a Master's in Food and Bioprocessing Engineering from the University of Illinois, and a BS Food Science and Chemistry from Alabama A&M in Huntsville, Alabama. Mr. Speller has diverse experience in food, beverage, and consumer packaged good manufacturing. His accomplishments include work with several leading North American and global food, beverage, and engineering companies. Mr. Speller has proven experience with diverse processing systems and products. He has been responsible for process development from concept, product, and process design, specification, bidding processes, and equipment selection through installation, startup, commissioning, and launch. Malcolm Speller currently serves as the Chief Operating Officer of Mini SA, an agro-industrial company based in West Africa. Welcome, Professor Speller.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to start this off, and I have to say that I'm extremely excited to have you here. And one of the reasons why is, I'm an outsider looking inside your industry. And when I read this book, I'm not sure if you all can see it, but it's Salt, Sugar, and Fat. Man, it blew me away. And so when we spoke on the phone this past week and we had the opportunity to have an actual insider, I feel like I'm one-upping Michael Moss and that we have someone who knows the ins and outs of the business that we can really speak to. Man, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to have you on the Slave Food Conversation with my partner in crime, Dr. Eric Walsh. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
All right. Now, I have...
And we have to thank Jason Thompson from down in Jamaica. Tell him thanks for making this connection. Honestly, I know he tunes in.
Excellent. I'll spend
yes,
it. Jason, it's a pleasure.
That connection. It's nice to have connections all the way back to college. It pays off. I'm gonna tell the young kids out there: make sure you make good, solid friends. They pay dividends in the future.
There we go.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Now, I know I told you that I was going to send you a series of questions, but I always like to start off with something a little bit different, right? And since you're such a traveled man, I want to know, give me first your top 5 favorite snack foods.
I love bananas. Number one, we'll start there.
All right.
Then something I've come into is nuts and dates. So in Senegal, I began eating cashews and dates as my snacks through the day. And as you know, both of those are very rich. So you don't need much else if you're snacking on cashews and dates. And as I went to other countries in the continent, peanuts, roasted peanuts,
Okay.
dates, bananas, peanuts, bananas. So these types of things. So those three right there. And then during avocado season, you can find me with an avocado with every meal. I'll take a whole avocado and walk into a restaurant with an avocado in my hand and place my order and ask for a knife. I'll cut the avocado and have the two halves and they'll go with my meal. This type of thing. So you get into this really natural snacking and eating. A wonderful question, because that was part of a transition to healthier eating for myself, was learning how to snack different. So if we get, and so those was four there, I believe, was cashew, dates, peanuts, avocados, and mangoes. And if I mentioned bananas, so if that's my top 5 or 6 right there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to throw one other wrench inside there, and then I want to hear from Dr. Walsh too as well, your top 5, and then we'll get into the meat, so to speak, of this conversation. But tell me your favorite country that you tell us where you're at right now, and tell us your favorite country. No offense to where you're living or where you were born.
Right. Excellent. I'm in the Ivory Coast. I'm in the Côte d'Ivoire, as they say in French, the Ivory Coast. I'm in the capital city, Abidjan. So I live and work in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, in West Africa, right next door to Ghana. So Accra, Ghana is just that way, a nice 1-hour plane flight. So my favorite country, just off the top, is Brazil. And my favorite country in Africa is actually, I really enjoy Abidjan, and I really enjoy Nigeria. So as you mentioned, I've traveled a lot, so you end up having multiple answers, but I think that kind of covers Nigeria and Ivory Coast would be two of my favorite in the continent. And then globally, Brazil is just Bahia. Bahia in Brazil is a beautiful place to be. It just feels good. The people are happy, and it's just a beautiful experience.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I haven't been to any of those countries, but hopefully soon I'll make my way there. I'm sure the good Dr. Walsh has been there before. Eric, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and recap for those who are joining in right now and maybe you didn't have a chance to listen to our Juneteenth presentation, which is an overriding presentation of everything. Give us a sense of what weaponization of food. Recap us briefly on weaponization of food, and then we're going to get into this heavy conversation with our good Malcolm Speller.
Okay.
So we have this concept of weaponizing nutrition. And it comes from the fact that during slavery, food was used as a way to control people. That started even before they entered the Middle Passage. When I was in Ghana and I went to one of the slave castles, that's one of the things that the young man who was giving us the tour showed us that in fact there would be 200-300 people packed into small spaces, and they would throw food in the middle. If someone didn't do what they wanted, they wouldn't feed them at all. So nutrition was weaponized as a way to weaken, control people. This continued, of course, during the Middle Passage on the slave ships, that in fact, what happened was if the slave ship captain wanted to make extra money, he would cut back on the rations for the slaves as a way to try and increase his profit. And of course, if a slave didn't do something he wanted or acted out, or even some of the women didn't give them what they wanted, they would withhold food. Again, a way to control. Nutrition was again weaponized when you got to the plantation in North America and even in the Caribbean. And it was weaponized by making sure that the slaves only got the poorest portions of the food, the intestines of a pig, which we now call chitlins here in America, pig's feet, chicken neck bones and stuff like this, rancid or leftover food that the master wouldn't eat. So food nutrition was weaponized in that you were giving enough food so that you could work all day, but not enough that you could really rise up and rebel. And so food was a way to control. And it was, again, weaponized. And we know that now from modern science that by withholding certain foods rich in omega-3s and antioxidants and other things, you actually impact brain development. And there are actually nutritional deficiencies that actually impact behavior quite seriously. So food has been weaponized from that perspective. In the modern terms, what we look at in the slave food Food Project is how all that translates to today. And we know that there are people, and this is what we're going to talk about tonight, who literally sit down and design food to do two things. One of them is to make sure that you continue to buy it, making it at least somewhat addicting, or so pleasurable that it's hard to turn away from it. And there's a lot we can say about it. I have a page of notes here of from books I've read and so forth. But the other side of it is, besides just that, is, again, I honestly believe that the reason that well, there's two more things. One of them is by giving people who are oppressed nutritionally sparse, calorie-rich foods, you knew that you could control them and lead them into kind of a docile place where they wouldn't rise up. Like basically like giving them opium, or opiates. But the other thing, of course, is food is weaponized to make certain people very wealthy, just as the slave ship captain would hold back certain things to try and increase his profit. We are now flooded with nutrient sparse, calorie dense foods into many parts of America. The standard American diet overall. So let's just be clear. We talk a lot here about the African American experience, but let's be honest and clear. There are 700,000 deaths that can be tied back to the standard American diet for all Americans. And when you look at the death rate and the death toll and the sickness and the decrease, not just in lifespan, but in health span that these foods cost, they really are slave foods. And nutrition really has been weaponized as a way to control a population and to decrease the numbers of that population.
Powerful, powerful. So Malcolm, question for you after hearing kind of components of what we've researched and what we've tried to convey. Is the food industry malicious or are they capitalistic?
They're capitalistic. There's a saying that I like, the business of business is business. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
Say it one more time. The business of business is business. And the food industry is doing the business of food. And it's nice if you like it, but it's much nicer if you buy it again. And so the food industry is doing what they can to make sure that you buy again. And I think when we were talking, we talked about this little phrase that I came up with, good, or that tastes good, I want to buy another. And that's the point of the industry. Good, I want to buy another. If you don't do that, then the food industry has missed its mark. But every product that you pick from the shelves, for whatever reason you're using it for, you're purchasing it, when it hits that mark, you say, good, I want to buy another. And when you do that, the industry then works more. Otherwise, you no longer have the business of food then goes under. That doesn't happen. So then that's the intent. And it's not necessarily malicious, but you end up with some outcomes that aren't preferable.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I want to repeat something you said to make it really clear. The business of business is business. And I did, as simple as that is, that's still profound because it tells you that we often assume that the business is in business to do us good.
Yes.
But when they have shareholders and others that they're responsible to make sure they turn a profit, and the unfortunate reality of capitalism, and I am a capitalist. I'm not, I have nothing against making money or people making money. But the unfortunate thing about our capitalism is you have to make more money every year. Like the stocks have to keep going up. It's not enough that the company makes money and can pay a dividend. People want to see that it makes more and more and more money, which means you drive the company to a place where they have to keep making more and more, a product that is more than just good, I'll buy another, to good, I can't live without this. I got to have a whole, kitchen full of this stuff. And that's really where we're going.
Do the people who are a part of the business, and I don't mean the mid-level and the lower level workers, I mean the top-notch people, do they eat the food? Do they buy the food? Do they partake of it? In your experience?
In my experience, you have a change, you have a transition where initially, yes, people are buying these things and taking it home and doing these types of things. Still, even now, you can find people eating things, but we're starting to know more. So these food professionals are like myself. Well, we're people. I guess that's the number one way to say it. I've made it a point to advance my perception of food and how I relate to food so that I'm a lot healthier, but it's not necessarily because of the work that I do. So a lot of us are a lot healthier. We're making better decisions. You'll find we're real informed. We're healthier. And then you'll run into some who are eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, wrapped in breast. I see this mention the name of Kentucky Fried Chicken if that makes a difference. But these sort of high trans fat, loaded with salt, sugar, and wafting it down, and you're doing, that's going to kill you, right? And they continue to do what they do. But your point is, to your question, that the executives or the leadership are beginning to get smarter. And because they've seen a lot of information, they're aware that low salt diet is better for you. They're aware that complex carbohydrates are better for you. They're aware of these things. So they tend to have begun to make adjustments for these things. And that's sort of the as we would say, my guys in Texas would say, that's the happening thing, is that guys are getting better about taking care of themselves. Can you hear me okay? My mic is hanging. You guys can hear me okay? Am I picking up
better
okay?
now?
Actually, when you hold it out like that, it actually sounds a lot better.
There we go. Thank you. I'll make sure to keep my hand on it here.
Perfect.
Let me jump in and just say this though. So when the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry, I should say, they for many years said, listen, we're not trying to kill people. We just trying to sell cigarettes. I remember there were billboard ads. We should put up some of these one week, Columbus, where 3 out of 4 doctors recommend Camels for your anxiety and all this kind of stuff. Would be billboards in the 40s and probably in the 50s even. So they basically went to they held that as all the way through the court and through their big lawsuits. The food industry doesn't do that. And this is something we talk about when we do the talk. The food industry says, listen, I bet you can't eat just one. The food industry says, once you pop, you can't stop. The food industry basically tells you, and I just was one of the books I was just reading this week, I was rereading a lot of my books on this, has a quote from TGI Fridays where they talk about, how you're not going to be able to come into their restaurant and just eat a little bit of their food. You're gonna eat all the kinds of stuff in their restaurant, and they have a whole paragraph about that. So is it really not malicious then? I mean, if it's harming people, and people are going to get hooked to it like the cigarettes, is there somebody in there that still is not doing an ethics check and saying, maybe we're obligated to not try and make this much profit on people's health?
Right. Correct. You're right. Once you, great point. Once you become aware, because you have sort of this, conscious, what do you call it? Conscious expertise, unconscious expertise, something like that. But you're an expert and you're conscious, you're aware of what's happening, then it becomes, yes, you're making a decision to consciously sell people things or promote things that aren't good for people, and then putting it on the person saying, well, it's their choice. And it's good for our bottom line, and this is the product that we make. If you don't want our product, then go get a salad. And we offer salads, so you can get those too. So, and people will logic themselves around the profits. So when you sit in the board table, guys will be aware, and they'll make more healthy offerings and these types of things. But then they're very aware that when the steak is there and the slab of ribs with Jack Daniel's barbecue glaze, right, which is corn syrup with a little bit of tomato paprika. Let me not give it away, but barbecue sauce is actually sugar. I haven't been in a barbecue sauce facility. Doesn't work for them. It's like, okay, that's not a lot of sauce going there. Not tomato, not what we think it is anyway. But I'll leave that alone for the moment. That the decisions aren't going to be that. The decisions are driven by different things, and the decisions are driven by the things that make the company money. Salt leads, sugar leads, oil leads, because all of those are likeness drivers. And I want to mention something just at this point in the conversation. Through the 80s and into the 90s, there's a Japanese concept called umami. And have you heard of umami?
I think I've heard that name.
I've heard of it before, but break it down for us.
All right, excellent. Umami means, it doesn't mean that you like it. It means a goodness. Something that has umami is just like, mouth-watering. Like when Kentucky Fried Chicken says finger looking good, that's umami. So that word says that without having to say finger looking good, without having to say you can't just eat just one. Umami is that quality of can't just eat just one, And so companies began to pursue umami for the key products. and there's certain drivers of umami. And so we know that salt is one. People like salty foods. Salt is also cheap, so it's good for business. You follow?
Mhm.
Sugar is another one. People like sugar. You give something loaded with sugar, they walk away and they'll turn around and come back. So we had these Mexican cornflakes one time. I was working with General Mills, and they'd had a higher sugar content. So we were visiting a facility in California there, where was this? In the San Joaquin Valley, Northern Valley, near just about 40 miles south of Sacramento. So cereal processing facility, a box of Mexican cornflakes was in the project engineer's office. And I said, he mentioned it. These were Mexican cornflakes. I said, okay, we can try them. He said, sure. So we popped this box of Kellogg's cornflakes, Mexican cornflakes, and poured some in the hand. And you sort of just knock them back. We're in the office talking about the project where we were doing, and I handed them to my colleague who had come. We were visiting from a facility in Iowa where he and I were based. And then we closed the box and put it back on his desk and kept talking. And then 30 seconds later, he's going, hey, I can see that box again. He says, yeah. I grab it, open it up into my hand, hand it to my colleague, he in his hand, puts it back on his desk, and we're sitting and talking, and it's like, is it okay if I grab this box again? He said, yeah. And I said, what's going on? What's in these things? He says, just a lot more sugar. That's what it is. We're going to have a sugar high in a minute. He says, yeah, that might happen. And so this was Mexican cornflakes. So for different markets, this is what we're mentioning. Let me grab my microphone here. This is what we're mentioning, is that the business will know that it's adding more sugar because the Mexican market likes more sugar, and you sell more boxes that way. In the United States, you can't necessarily add more sugar to a Kellogg cornflake at this point because the American consumer won't necessarily buy that, won't necessarily go for that. So as the consumer becomes more aware and makes different choices, then the food industry adjusts, because the business of business is business. We need to keep the top line going in order to arrive at our bottom line. So the consumer has power, but it's about being aware of that power. And we'll talk more about it. I don't want to give all the answers in one question, but that's the question.
I do want to, you mentioned something that's deep, and I do want to touch back on that sugar point. But first, before we do that, break down for just a moment for people who are listeners out there what a food scientist is, because I mean, I'm going to play ignorant for a moment. And if I'm just a person growing up and I'm a kid, I'm thinking, a food scientist, what is that? I know my mom cooks. I know I go to the restaurant and I buy food there. What does the scientist have to do with food? What does an engineer have to do with food? And so break that down for us for a moment and what that means.
Excellent. The food scientist, so we have science, and I think there we go, presentation coming up, and let's see that I can, I myself would call myself a food engineer now. I began my degrees with food science, and this is me in 2003 working with a food scientist. He was a protein chemist specifically, and we were launching Eggbeaters. This is excuse me, I'm getting tangled there. My mic back to my ear, or the headphones there, earphones. This is Eggbeater's Omelette. So I was the process engineer, he was the lead food scientist. What he did was design the product. So it was a egg white, liquid egg white, and what I did was design the functionality that delivered the ingredients into those cartons there, and it was what we call a near aseptic product, where it was just short of being sterile, the way we delivered it, and it goes into the refrigerated chain. I'm trying not to use terms that are too industry specific, but the idea of the food scientist, so we have a food engineer and a food scientist, myself being the food engineer at this point. The food scientist designs the product that goes in the food. He understands the food chemistry, the chemistry of the elements. The elements that are in the food are largely what are in our bodies. So you have proteins, you have fats, you have carbohydrates, you have minerals, you have different nutrients of vitamins and this sort of thing that are in our bodies. And we find those same products in our foods because they're in the plants and of course, the animals. And these in this case are chicken eggs, the egg whites, which would be the albumin, the protein of the egg, with a little bit of food coloring, some beta carotene to give it the orange color, a little onion powder, and then a lot of omelet ingredients, which I developed a system to inject those ingredients into the container there. And that's right outside of the filling room. So we were coming out of the filling room. If you let me, I'm an engineer, so if I start talking, I'm going to start describing things, correct? But this is sort of what we do. So this is where food product is being made. It's sort of happening here. And this occurs in every plant for every product. There's somewhere where that product is coming out with its primary packaging sort of wrapped around it. And then it goes to different levels of packaging in order to be delivered to a consumer. But this is sort of the end of our work. He's designed the product. I've designed the process to deliver that product. This was in 2003, 17 years later. This product is still on the market. It's the only seller. There's nobody who's been able to design the process. I'm going to smile now. I hate to say this I statement, but that I designed.
That's all right. Take your credit. Take your credit.
There's no one's reproduced it. No one's done it again. So only Eggbeaters has this pourable egg white omelet, and it was during the Atkins diet, and everyone wanted a high protein breakfast, because once you look at it, breakfast foods are really high in carbohydrates, and we wanted a high protein breakfast. So we're given 9 months to deliver this project. One of the most exciting ones that I worked on. But in this specific way, it discusses a little bit about what a food scientist does and what a food engineer does, what we do. And I'm going to.
So one of the things I read
about
in terms of when food is crafted is, like you mentioned, the minerals and things of that nature that are injected or placed in there, that sometimes there has to be binders, and sometimes the salt that's added is necessary to mask the taste from some of the minerals and other things like that. So it's used not only for a preservative, it's also used as a masking agent. And so there's a multitude of uses for what you alluded to before, and we'll get back into that later on, but the salt, sugar, and fat. Is that a correct assumption from what I've read?
That's correct. Very, very accurate. Or very correct. And then we'll add to it for the accuracy. Or precision, right? Difference between accuracy and precision, right? So very accurate, and we'll be more precise. There we go. So the food product, when we taste it, so we put it together, and I'll go back to that slide because you have a food scientist standing there. So as he developed the product and he puts it on our product displays as we are determining what the flavor should be, we'll taste something and we'll say, that has a little bit of a metallic flavor. What's happening there? And he'll say, okay, that might be the BHT interacting with the flavors. And I had a different, I don't want to mention a flavor company specifically, but I had a flavor company essence of egg white or egg yolk added in order for this particular flavor. Then if that's too much, then I can make some adjustments. And then the next panel, which might be in a week or 2 weeks, he'll have another variety that has made some adjustments with the salt levels. He might use, instead of using sodium chloride, he might use potassium chloride in order to reduce sodium levels. So you get some of the salt balance, and the calcium will be there, or the chloride, without the sodium, if you have the potassium chloride. And then that'll help some of the balance that's going on without, or the food chemistry and the pH set, which is very important for proteins, because proteins will precipitate out when the pH changes and when the temperature changes. So you want to keep these things in balance. So the food scientist is doing a lot of work to balance that, the parameters of the food product. Now, what happens in your kitchen is you can deliver that food product and it goes to the table, within 5 to 20 minutes. You wait longer than that, in instance, it'll be cold. But you have this time window that you want to deliver. For us, we'll make this product, and it will, I think this one had a shelf life of maybe 9 months, maybe upwards of 1 year in the refrigerator. So the point of delivery might be 9 months from this moment when it popped out of the equipment, the filler in this case. The person might be pouring that omelet 9 months later. So there's a lot of balancing that needs to be done in the food chemical environment in order to allow that to deliver properly. And in fact, the expiration date on the majority of products is not because the product spoils because of microbes, but we can't guarantee that the food chemistry is good after that point, or that the food chemistry is as it was intended. I can't say good is relative to what you're looking at, but that the food chemistry, the company is not guaranteeing that the product is as it was intended after that date. So with respect to an expiration date, a person can eat it. It's not going to kill you or something, but it's not. It it has differed from as it was intended. At this point, they don't tend to spoil in the bottle because of the work that we do. If that makes sense.
That,
So is that tied to, I've seen these people on the internet. We talk about this in our talks, who've taken like Happy Meals, or they've taken like Twinkies, and they put them up in a cupboard, and they come back like a year later, and the French fries almost look the same, the hamburger bun looks the same, the hamburger looks the same. Like it's a miracle. Like this thing is just sat up there, nothing's spoiled. And in the talks, what I say is, what I say in the talk is that it doesn't spoil because even the bacteria and the fungus realize it's not real food. There's no nutrition in it. And Michael Moss calls that, Michael Poland calls that food-like substances. So is it that do they strip all of these nutrients for shelf life, or is there another reason? Because what you just said, no book has ever revealed that in fact the expiration date has more to do with guaranteeing the product is what it was intended to be rather than spoilage. So when you can put up a hamburger on a shelf and come back in a year and it looks the same, I'm sure it wouldn't taste the same. Is that about shelf life alone, or is there something else at play?
That clearly shelf life. So when we realize the business of the food is the longer that we can keep the product in front of the consumer, the more opportunities for purchase, right? So every container that comes out, the longer it can sit on the shelf, then there's more opportunities for purchase. And every time a consumer purchases, that's where the profit is. That's where it happens. If that's not happening, then you can put the products on the shelf all day. If they're not moving, it really doesn't matter. So we work with those shelf lives. That's very important, shelf life. So there's guys who really spend a lot of time getting this shelf life. In fact, one of the parameters of a product that the business guys will calculate on is what is the shelf life, and they'll come in saying, hey, we need a shelf life of 45 days if it's a sensitive product, maybe a dairy or something like that. And there's ways of getting that in process and in product development. So with this process technologies that can give us longer shelf life, this product development as in ingredient systems, food chemical and ingredient systems that will help us get a longer shelf life. And one of the things when we mentioned spoilage, so I want to talk about cooking as well. And I think I mentioned that in this conversation, maybe that'll be of value. Spoilage, we usually think of microbes, so microbial spoilage. That's very straightforward. And the spoilage is also, it's a product not being as it's intended, it's spoiled. So it's spoiled from, if it's there's a word suddenly on the end of my tongue. It's adulterated. So if it's adulterated by something, that's spoilage. If microbes are there growing out of line, that's spoilage. That's what we usually think of. If the food chemistry is off, that's spoilage. If the flavors go bad, that's spoilage. If the colors go bad, that's spoilage. If the smell goes bad, that's spoilage. All of these things are part of the organoleptic experience, and it happens that when you don't have them all, if the texture goes bad, that's spoilage. You've opened up, like when we were younger, you open up a bag of potato chips. It doesn't happen much now, but back when we were younger, you open up a bag of potato chips and they're stale. I mean, how often do we run into stale potato chips now? We don't see that often because
they've engineered it better.
Right,
designed
exactly.
It better, I should say.
We've designed it better, correct. So these food chemical systems. So we look at our ingredient list, as you know, the ingredient labels, and those lists of ingredients are for these different functionalities. And you want that ingredient list to be nice and short, and you want everything there to have a tree that it comes from. Ideally, that it's peanuts, oil seed, salt is fine. We know where salt comes from relative to its level, but you don't want the list of ingredients to be other processed foods. So when your food is a set of ingredients from other processed foods, then you know you have an issue. You follow? And what's happening, I mentioned these things about spoilage to say that there's tertiary butyl hydroxytoluene, BHT, tertiary butyrated hydroxyquinone or quinine. I mean, someone can look up the name exactly, but TBHQ, TBHT, and these things are to keep oils from going rancid, oxidative rancidity in those things. So they're preservatives. We have different types of elements that are keeping microbes from wanting to eat that. So they're antimicrobial. So you put that burger out, or you strip the flour, like we shouldn't be eating white flour at this point. We shouldn't be eating white rice. If you've noticed, ants will go around it. You drop a peppermint stick on the ground, ants won't eat it. They'll go around it unless it's kind of has a nice sugar syrup on it. Then they'll go at the sugar. But there's certain foods that we eat that an ant won't touch, and you shouldn't eat it either. You follow? But as you mentioned, those ingredients are there to keep the spoilage from happening. And that's why you get these fries that have been dipped in oil. The oil itself is an oil that's not going to go not quickly going to go rancid. Therefore, it's not as natural. It's a very processed oil. And that oil then is not of value for oxidative rancidity. It's not of value for microbes are not wanting to get at it. The proteins in the beef have been wrapped in emulsifiers, these types of things, so that the natural processes are not occurring. It's not breaking down in the food sense. So I'm layering some detail on the same subject, right? And
so I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question. So it sounds like on multiple levels. So the food is being adjusted. It's almost like back in general chemistry class for myself, when we would go through with the test tubes and we would try and make the precise chemical compound that was there. So on one hand, that's being done for shelf life and for to masking agents too as well. But on another hand, what I've read is that these ingredients, the sugar, salt, and fat, these other aspects are being adjusted according to taste, specifically to individuals, specifically to women versus children versus black versus brown versus white versus yellow, to garner towards them there. And so is there an awareness of the impact of these additives, these emulsifiers, these compounds in order to stabilize this chemical concoction, really, that many of us are eating, and its impact on our health and its ultra processed foods?
Okay. So at these price points, you give the consumer options, and I'm speaking for the industry, so I'm speaking broadly. So we have Whole Foods, we have companies that are producing the healthy choice, Healthy Choice being one particular brand that just came to mind, but we have the healthy options that are being presented, and those are there. The price point is different because they realize people are willing to pay a premium, and they'll price them at the edge of that premium and along with competition in order to create a business. And remember, the business of business is business. So then there's a different price point, which is the lower price point, which you're finding at Dollar Foods, you're finding at maybe at Walmart in the cheaper food section, at your Kroger, in the dollar buys or whatever the case. And these are the cheaper foods that people who have less knowledge of these things are buying, and these things are not things that you want to eat when you're more informed. So the company then is aware that these aren't good ingredients, but however they're pricing them and placing them for a market that's going to buy those. And it's in that sense, because the FDA hasn't said you have to run, for some of these things, they do have this, where you have to run let people know this ingredient is there. If that's the case, then that ingredient will be removed. So the food company has been going through a lot of iterations the past 30 years, maybe 40 if we go into the 80s, of removing ingredients as they're becoming to be banned or be prohibited by the FDA or whoever may be the case. And at this point, the food industry largely controls the FDA, as we're aware. And so there's a nice jockeying or interplay, I should say, between what's allowed and what's not allowable. So the food industry will do what's allowed because there's the RDA or the GRAS. We have something called the GRAS levels, generally regarded as safe, GRAS. And then, of course, the recommended daily allowances of something with respect to nutrients. And with respect to ingredients, then we would talk about we would speak of GRAS, generally regarded as safe. So this ingredient GRAS, and we'll discuss that. As the food scientist is solving different problems around the delivery of a particular food product in a way that it ticks the box with respect to the marketing scores, because we do these companies are marketing driven. So they're not driven by myself. I'm hitting a target that marketing has given us, or production or operations or planning has given with respect to myself, rate of delivery, rate of production, how fast can we make it? And then I'm hitting the target with respect to the food scientist. Are we getting the color? Are we getting the flavor? Are we getting the texture? And I'm delivering that instead of a process. The food scientist is delivering that from development of the product, and he's hitting a particular box that the marketing guys have said, if we hit this box, people will buy it. And not only will they buy it, but they'll buy it again. If we market it in this fashion, and as you mentioned, to women. So because it's going to women, then we know we need to tweak the flavor this way because we found that women prefer that. Women like the XYZ when it's lighter green, so we're going to use lighter green colors. It really is intense and a beautifully studied, I'm using the word beautiful in order to be more positive, a beautifully studied subject around the idea of marketing and creating of foods. And the U.S. food industry may do it better than everyone, given the amount of obesity that we have in our country. We are very good at getting good food products to people who want to eat them. And good, I mean that it tastes good. That's what I mean. We, of course, have an increasing level of people who are into nutrition, and therefore we have this growing good nutrition. As you know, Whole Foods was recently purchased by Amazon, and more people are aware of kale is recently changed on kale, but more people are eating seaweed chips and raw cashews or what have you, because more people are aware of many things. I want to step back to something and mention something very fundamental, because these I want to toss two things in if I can. I think they're fundamental concepts when we look at food. One is, why do we cook? And so why do we cook? Okay, all food is processed. That was one of your questions. In essence, just by taking it off the tree, there's a little bit of process. Just accessing the food would be that primary process. And then there's secondary and tertiary processing, which do different levels of things. And then there's thermal processing, which is a kill step, but there's reasons that we do that, which is, why do we cook? Like, I'm going to toss something else in. These things become very layered, but people say that we're, like, I'm plant-based, largely vegetarian. I eat very few animal products. I feel better. I mean, we're all mature men, and our skin is clear, and our faces are bright, and there's other guys that are our age who are in different conditions. And there's a reason why we are presenting ourselves the way that we do, and largely is because of the food choices that we've made. So what I want to say is that we call ourselves carnivores. There's guys who argue for eating meat. I'm a carnivore. Let's say, actually, the reason you like the chicken is because of the rosemary that's on it, and the black pepper, and the onion powder, and the cayenne pepper, and you follow? It's not the chicken. If you're a carnivore, go chase the chicken down and bite him and tell me how that works for you. Then you're a carnivore. Until then, you're an herbivore or an omnivore who likes the taste of plant on your meat. But until you can take a raw burger and put it on something and eat it without any seasoning or without anything like that, then you're getting into carnivore area. And carnivores have very short lives. So a lion lives about 12 to 14 years. As you know, dogs live about 11 years. All of our carnivores have short digestive systems and short lives. Our elephants live 60 to 70 years in the wild, you know. Our tortoises live 150 years, you follow. Our buffaloes are huge. I mean, I remember being in Asia. I lived in India for about 2 years. And worked in India, I should say, because you say lived in India, people think you were kind of slumdog millionaire there. But yeah, doing facility design for Unilever. So we were doing some high-level engineering in India, just based from there, and building facilities around the world for Unilever. But the idea is this: just seeing those water buffaloes, they were huge. Oh my! Just like other, in French you say ultra shows, it's something else, but they're vegetarian. You follow? Oxes, yaks, some of the strongest animals are vegetarians. Gorillas, the strongest, apes relative of ourselves are huge and just immense. Silverback, and he's a vegetarian. He's not eating meat. So we'll say we're carnivores, but that's not really the case. Now Malcolm, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because you brought up traveling all over and where you live in these various places. And one thing that I've come to understand is the fact that regulations are different in different countries. So where they're outlawed certain ingredients, certain dyes, certain compounds, certain binders in other countries because they've been found to be harmful to human health, but yet they're allowed here. You know, there was a story that with one of the famous sandwich chains several years ago that they found out, say, oh, there's rubber inside the bread, and this isn't allowed inside of Europe and inside of Canada, but it's allowed in the United States. Can you speak to that at all?
Our lobby is strong. So the FDA is where lobbying within the food industry happens. So the FDA, the board of the FDA are often assigned or appointed by whoever appoints them, this sort of thing. And these guys are Indian industry representatives. They're often members from give it a name company, you follow? And these sort of almost self-regulating the industry, even though the FDA is a governmental body. Those guys who are directing it or are providing informational, saying this is what we do, are industry driven. And in Europe, you have a different relationship to the industry. So they'll ban substances that that are not grass, or they're not generally regarded as safe in Europe, but they're generally regarded as safe in America, but they're not safe. You know, we haven't gotten to them yet, and there are a number of those that still exist in the food industry in the U.S. and globally. So, because the business of business is business, and the business is driven by regulations, if a regulation doesn't exist to stop the use of something, someone popped up ethics. The ethics of the company will allow a company to do things or use ingredients that are still regarded as safe. They'll move forward and continue to use them, even though in other places in the world they're not regarded as safe. So in one view, Europe can be seen as extreme, taking things to another level. Often California is seen as extreme, but in California's extremity or a level of diligence, we'll call it diligence, they're often protecting the rest of the United States, because what California sets, sometimes the company will take that and apply it to the rest of the U.S. And I'll say something as well, when we talk about this not being malicious, is that the consumer expects, so say we've had an Oreo before, and just as a show of hands, we can say we've eaten an Oreo before, right? Maybe one of you guys have eaten an Oreo before as well. And you remember the taste.
I'm a recovering sugarholic. I am a recovering sugarholic.
There we go. There we go. So just using an Oreo as an example, in 1986, give it a number, we ate an Oreo, say, in Miami. Then in 1993, we eat an Oreo in Washington, Seattle, Washington, completely opposite side of the country. 7, 8 years later, we expect that Oreo to taste the same, correct? Yeah, same color, same taste.
Yeah.
2020, unless there's been an ad, the Oreo's creamier now, or now has more chocolatey flavor, you expect it to taste exactly the same as the Oreo you had in 1996 or 1986. And in order to deliver that level of consistency, product consistency, then the industry makes a lot of these gyrations and will reach for these compounds in order to deliver these products to people that they're wanting. So when people don't want the products anymore, then the companies will make changes because they won't be profitable. You follow? And the industry does respond to the consumer very quickly.
Well, let me jump in, because I think you've laid the groundwork very well here. And we see that profits drive these things, and there is, in a sense, the possibility, let's say it that way, of ethical lapses because of the lobbying power of the food industry in the United States of America. I think it's ironic because we think of our country as a democracy, but what you find is that there is a vote of dollars. So a great example is aspartame, and how aspartame actually got into diet sodas in the United States, connected to someone who was a high-ranking official in the executive branch of the U.S. government at the time. I won't get into that. You can look it up and see. But so we know that these things have been happening. It is mind-blowing, because if aspartame wasn't fit for food 4 years earlier, it's amazing that a change of administration and the right person being in place, all of a sudden aspartame was safe for human consumption. But there's other things. If we're talking about weaponizing nutrition, shelf life we've hit, right? You've also hit regulations and the influence of government in the ability to do that. But the government works another way, and that is the government helps subsidize some of these foods and even subsidizes some of its advertisement and marketing. We talked about a bit about this in some of the other episodes, but that's something I would love to hear from you. So you're showing us that the industry sends money into the government. What's mind-blowing is the government also sends money back into the industry. So specifically, dairy, corn, soy, Columbus helped me, wheat. There's certain things
those are the main ones
that naturally it flows back in. So when we talk about salt, sugar, and fat, it is partly because of the way the government subsidizes. Salt, not so much. It's cheap. But sugar, high fructose corn syrup, is highly subsidized. And oils. And one of the things I don't think people get is how bad for you oils are. The olive oil, coconut oil, it doesn't matter. It's 140, 120 calories a tablespoon with minimal ingredients. Talk to that aspect of the government in the role of weaponizing nutrition.
Okay, outstanding. And that goes internationally as well with respect to the United States. I want to throw something in because I'm in the industry as well. Okay, I'm gonna speak to the angel on the other shoulder as I'm tossing fire and brimstone right here. the industry's gotten a lot better. So food industry, I think one of you guys might ask me how the industry was, or maybe someone in a previous conversation. And the industry is getting a lot better. We have a lot better food industry than we used to have. So it's largely getting better. And the industry works hard to respond to new consumer changes. So things will be banned, sugar levels will come down, protein levels will increase if people want more protein, simple sugars will decrease, high fructose corn syrup will stop being used and be taken out of products. So the industry will go through jumps, will go and redesign whole facilities in order not to deliver things. I've taken high fructose corn syrup lines and tanks out of a facility. In fact, that's what we're doing at the barbecue facility there. Barbecue sauce that I mentioned earlier, we were putting in liquid sugar facility where you take granular sugar and then liquefy it and create something called liquid sugar, and you pull out the high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup.
But there's really no difference physiologically to those two things. Your blood won't know the difference between the sugar and the sugar. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right. You digress. We digress, right? But there's some additional metabolic issues around high fructose corn syrup that we find, which suppresses the hunger response, and you're aware of
very true.
And it has additional issues which we'll say don't, but the United States shows that it does. I mean, you look around and it does. And I'm not going to say that I have the study that proves it, but the idea is high fructose is not a friend of mine. I don't drink anything with high fructose corn syrup in it myself. So I just want to say that the industry is getting better and is really working hard to get better, and will continue. So the smarter we are, like everyone listening to this thing, and we begin to have a prerogative. We begin to have a choice. We begin to have a voice around these things. The industry will respond like that. You follow? And we need to continue to learn, continue to vote with our dollars, continue to make choices around what we buy. Send letters, tell them this is what I want. And when the industry gets that, hey, people want a more healthy snack food, they want a more healthy chip, then the industry will set to work to make it happen, because they want it to be profitable. They want to feed everyone. They want the business to continue to roll. So it's not just that they're these horned, horrible people trying to shove terrible things down our throat. They will adjust and have continued to adjust. I want to throw that out there as an industry guy, so that I'm not like banned from everything that ever happens in the world, right?
All right. Well, okay. Let me jump in again. So what you're speaking to is like a collective consciousness that has to be raised up by the people, and that will drive the industry to do things different. Here's where the rubber meets the road in our conversation tonight. As the Slave Food Project, African Americans, poor people, Native Americans, Guamanians, when I lived in Guam. The U.S. has the power, even with all of that consciousness. So all of a sudden, you're going to see the suburbs doing exactly what you said. So Whole Foods is going to drift into the suburbs. They're not going to drift into the hood. So we still have the food swamps we talked about on another episode, the food deserts that we have in another episode. And what I believe will simply happen is the Takis,
processed snack foods.
These processed snack foods will come into our neighborhoods because of another thing. The last leg of this chair to me is the addictive quality of some of these foods. And here's the thing: we know that drugs were allowed into some of our neighborhoods, and nobody really stepped in and did anything, because they felt like these neighborhoods, who cares? I almost wonder if that's the same thing will happen to us, because one, our people are going to be a lot less aware. Our higher stress levels will drive us to eat more comfort foods. Is the industry going to really respond, or what they did with malt liquor and menthol cigarettes? Will the food industry do that to Black people and poor people and Latino people and Native Americans? I want to believe that they wouldn't do it, but something tells me that you will find this slave food in our neighborhoods long after it disappears from other parts of America.
Yeah, I think that addiction, if you can touch on that specifically too as well, because that umami, or that addictive quality that's in food, this bliss point, is something that keeps us coming back when we decide we're not going to do it in the morning, but by the evening time, we somehow have forgotten our goals. When we're standing in a long checkout line to get our groceries, and what's sitting there right on the side are all the temptations. At the last minute, we're grabbing something we had intended not to ingest earlier. And so I think that's kind of like what Eric is talking about too as well, this whole confluence of issues there.
Excellent, excellent. So there's some things happening where the importance of the project that we have that you guys have initiated and are have engaged is getting knowledge to the people, right? So the people can follow the similar feedback loop of we don't want that anymore. We want healthier foods. We want better options. We don't want the low. We want healthy foods at price points we can manage, and also the knowledge to know that you can get some black-eyed peas and rice and other vegetables and that's cheaper than the box of Kellogg cornflakes, which are used. But the box of cereals and this sort of thing, that you can eat healthy, it's accessible, particularly now because the price points, as I'm aware, price points are changing on a lot of things, and there's ways to put things together, and the knowledge of how to put that together is available to us more and more. Now, something that's happening within this addictive quality of things is the toxicity that exists within our bodies because of previous eating. And part of my change in myself was understanding nutrient metabolism and changing the way that I was ingesting nutrients. So I began to take in nutrients that allowed me to change my food decisions. A main one was vitamin B complex. So vitamin B complex helped me to drop my meat addiction. It helped me drop my sugar addiction. It helped me drop a bite for alcohol, where I rarely drink and barely would choose to. I don't have to have a hamburger or a piece of chicken or anything of that sort. I'm happy to have a plate stacked with black-eyed peas and rice and spinach and broccoli, and I'm happy to have that. 20 years ago, as we would speak now, the toxins that I carried in my body would have had me, craving the piece of chicken, doing some different things. I think, Eric, we spoke at length about the experience I had in San Diego, where my concepts changed around what was good for us. But a lot of that exists within us, and it's about cleaning the body. And when you clean your body out, you're able to make more sane choices. You become less impulsive around your decisions and these types of things. And the food space is a high trigger space. It's similar to other things that trigger addiction for us, meaning drugs, meaning our sexuality, meaning the food that we consume, and all those kind of trigger in the same area. And in fact, the groupings that we're speaking of, fat, sugar, salt, or oils, which are fat, liquid fat, and sugar, salt, target into the same thing, and they get us in this space, not itself necessarily umami, but in the right combinations, umami. And I want to toss something out about how animals eat. But fat, sugar, salt ends up being bad for us at these levels, but they give goodness relative to taste inexpensively. So flavors are often oil soluble. So the more oil something has, the more flavor it carries. So a nice greasy hamburger has a lot more flavor than the low fat hamburger. It's going to be drier. It's not going to have as much flavor. You have to work hard to deliver as much flavor in such, because the oils carry a lot of the flavors that we get organoleptically. Sugar is a sweetness. We have the sweetness trigger. The reason that we have a sweet tooth, and this is where sweetness is not malicious, before the 1700s or the 16th century, when sugar was discovered in the New World, and you could realize that you could extract this powder from it, this crystalline powder from it, and it was sweet. And then that was brought back over and it entered into the baked goods and that sort of thing of Europe and into the Middle East. Before that, they used dates. Dates and honey were the sweetest things that people had access to. In fact, that's where honeymoon comes from, right? Or date cakes, leaven, these different types of things that we see historically, anciently discussed. So sugar was developed, just 300-400 years ago. And then suddenly it became big as we realized, or humans realized that we can create these sugar plantations in Hispaniola and Jamaica and Barbados to, give it a name and run this sugar around the world. And oh my God, and that created this huge trade. And again, the business of business is business. We need more people to grow more sugar, to sell more sugar to more people. You follow? And it drives this thing around. So sugar, however, in that state has no nutrient. I'm going to toss something else in. That when we look at food, we say there's 3 types of food. This is from a nutritional point of view, not a processing point of view. But we have high nutrient food, neutral nutrient food, and low nutrient food. And that's it, relative to foods. You don't have to make it complex. All high nutrient foods are plants and vegetables. Plants are vegetables, fruits and vegetables. So plant-based materials are high nutrient foods. Neutral nutrient foods are things that are middling, processed such, and then low nutrient foods. It turns out that meats and such fall into the neutral or low nutrient or low categories, and all the high nutrient things are plants. So if we start eating based on nutrients, then we're going somewhere. So when plants, particularly fruits, are high nutrient, and what do they carry? They carry sweetness. they carry sweetness in order to attract animals and people to them. So mangoes are very sweet, and they carry a lot of beautiful nutrients that are good for the body. Strawberries are sweet, and they're wonderful for the body. Peaches are sweet, they're great for the body. Apples, oranges, dates, grapes, raisins. All of these items are sweet, and they're actually very good for you, as we want people to eat more fruits and vegetables now. However, when we short circuit that by pulling the sugar out of sugarcane and then delivering just the sweetness without the nutrients, then that sweet tooth, which used to lead you to high nutrient items, is now leading you to low nutrient items. So at the beginning, we had here high nutrient items, which are fruits and vegetables, fruits having a high sugar content. We pull that sugar out and are able to deliver it in high calorie, low nutrient foods, which are cookies, cakes, all this ice cream, which has the dairy element as well, as we're aware. You see what happens there? So the sweet tooth itself is not bad. And actually, men tend to outgrow their sweet tooth unless it kind of stays with you. But we tend to outgrow ours. But children and women have a sweet tooth in order to have the benefit of the high nutrients. You follow? So a woman, because of a woman's body and what it does, it needs the iron, it needs the fiber, it needs all the different things that you now get in the high potency vitamins that a woman would get, or this type of thing. Those high potency vitamins used to be the berries that a woman would pick, or the strawberry also being a berry. But the things that were sweet that a woman would go for in order to have a strong body, the vitamin C and these sorts of things. You follow? So I want to take the evil horns off of a sweet tooth. The issue is what we're satisfying that sweetness with, which is a zero nutrient sweetness. But if you go back to fruits and vegetables, then you can swap that out. So to bring that back around, I want to mention something else. I know I get on a roll here. I was working for a pet food company. And I think Columbus, we were discussing this the other day. You walk in a pet food facility, and it's a life-changing experience. I took a tour and almost vomited 3 times. They took me on the plant tour after lunch. I don't know why they did that, right? we had our morning interviews, and I was hired as an innovation engineer, which was cool, right? But in pet food facilities, and I didn't join because of the pet food, right? Because of the facility. But, just walking through there, the sense that hits your nose, you don't realize that you can vomit because of what you smell. I mean, women will tell you that, but as a man, those scents hits you, man, and you start to, your lunch begins to come back up. But a dog would love it, right? So you got to make this food for the dog. Somebody has to do it. So I'm standing. This is just a nice story with respect to. I'm standing on the dock, and we're about to go into the plant because the guy's showing me this is the dock. We're going to start from this point. We're going to walk through the facility, which is normal for the industry. He's going to show me the facility so I'll understand what type of processes I'll be engaged in. And we're standing there right out the car from lunch. In fact, I had a suit on, very similar to what I'm wearing now, maybe with a tie. And I was like, what's that smell? And the guy says, what smell? As I'm about to vomit. And I'm keeping that down, so I don't want to get too graphic here. But he became used to it. So there's many things that we become used to, and that again is about cleaning our bodies out so that we're not used to the hit of high fructose. We're not used to the hit of lots of sugars. We're not so used to all the oils that we get in our products, and we shift our body to not wanting that, the high salt content. It takes a moment to where you can get used to eating foods without that high salt, and your tongue adjusts, your taste buds, your organoleptic expectations change so that you're able to eat and enjoy foods without these markers that then have this commensurate effect on your health, which now I want to talk about why I mentioned pet foods. Some research scientists, which are part of the company from the UK, which where our pet care R&D was really headquartered in the company. They came over. I was working out of LA, close to you guys there, and in the West Coast headquarters of the company. And these guys came over, and they started talking about something we call perfect balance, or a perfect balance. So when you have a perfect balance of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates for animals, for carnivores, which cats and dogs in essence are base carnivores, omnivores for dogs, but have this carnivore thing happening. When you balance that properly, the animals will eat it up. Now, we were assuming that they eat like humans eat, but these guys found out that animals don't eat like humans eat. They eat for filling. So a cat will eat on how it feels. A dog will eat based on how it feels. Now, they like liver. A dog likes liver flavor, a cat maybe as well. Cats love tuna, even though tuna are way too big for a house cat to ever catch. But there's something in tuna that they really go for. However much they may like it, they are driven by how their food makes them feel. Follow? And that shifted what I was thinking, and I realized that I wasn't eating my food based on how I felt. I was eating my food based on taste. So that was a real big shift, and that's something important for us to do in America as humans, not just Americans, but begin to think about how our food makes us feel. So when you eat a big meal that has steak and all these different things, and you knock out for 2 hours, why did your food knock you out? You should be able to eat a meal, have it be full, and get up and still function, and have your food contribute to your optimal health. In essence, if this makes sense, you follow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, that, and I know Danette's going to add in some of the questions and welcome her back. But what I tell patients a lot of times inside my clinic is I'll tell them when we start doing my cooking class, I'll tell them, I'll say, listen, and they'll say, Doc, I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't want to try that. And I'll ask them a simple question. How many of you drink coffee? And hands will just raise up inside the room. And now I'll ask the question, how many of you drink alcohol or have tasted alcohol? And the hands will go up in the room. And then I ask everyone a follow-up question. How many of you enjoyed the taste of the coffee or the alcohol the very first time you had it? All the hands go down. And I tell them, I said, but why'd you keep doing it? Almost a converse, but same concept of what you're saying, that you did it because you liked the way the coffee gave you energy. You liked the way the alcohol relaxed you, so you kept doing it until you acquired the taste. And so I think that's one of the key things we have to understand, we have to learn, is the fact that just because our mind says we don't like this particular vegetable, once you start and you have a shift, as you described, in your taste buds, in your palate, you're going to all of a sudden begin to enjoy the way that this newfound health and wellness feels in your body. And you're going to engage in it, and you're going to want to continue it. And so I think there's power as far as in being aware of that fact there.
But that's also why it's slave food. It's slave food because they actually change your palate. And imagine when they start when you're 1 year old, 2 years old, change your palate towards liking foods that are rich or saturated in salt, sugar, and fat, highly processed food, all the things that you've been talking about. You grow up on that. How difficult is it when you've only known what a watermelon tastes like when you sucked on a watermelon now or later? You can't even appreciate the taste of a real watermelon. And that is profound in a sense that you can actually hijack, because the reason they can weaponize nutrition is that they are hijacking the reward system and the nuclear accumbens and all of the dopaminergic pathways in the brain. They're being hijacked. Columbus mentioned earlier the bliss point. You know, they can reach it to a point where it actually takes you to a place of almost euphoria. So here's where the food becomes dangerous and weaponized. It can make you, they can program it to make you feel a certain way. That's part of the danger. And so if you're stressed out, as many of us are in the African American community, we talked about that last week. The food now is literally like medicine. So just like a drug addict might self-medicate because of the trauma they experienced as a child, now we are self-medicating with honey buns and hot Cheetos and McDonald's and fried chicken because it makes us feel better. And that is why it's slave food. It isn't simply unidirectional. It is because we go into the restaurant or the grocery store or the corner store really with high stress levels, then they give us a product that's going to change the way we feel to the point of what the both of you just said. And then here's the last kicker point that kills it. The government subsidizes it. Government cheese, the welfare system, food stamps, all were allowed you to go and buy the lowest quality food so that the farms and other and big ag companies that were subsidized by the government on the other side now has a way to sell all of this food that, to your point, the suburban people are woken up as anyway. We're not feeding our kids this crap. They give it to us for free and then call us welfare recipients when we eat it. It's a powerful, deadly trap that's put upon our people.
Right.
All right. So very interesting conversation. There've been a lot of comments on the chat. You all kind of talked about what weaponizing nutrition is, but I don't necessarily I don't remember hearing a definitive definition. What is the definition of weaponizing nutrition?
I would say it goes back to what I said initially. I mean, when you make nutrition so that it can cause it's known to cause bad health effects, but you make it so that it is addicting. You make it so that it is. I shouldn't even. Maybe addicting is a strong term, because there are some who argue really can't get addicted to food, even though I think you can. But it's habit forming, and so you've weaponized this thing by making it so that people, once you pop, you can't stop. And I bet you can't eat just one. And at the same time, you know that what that person is consuming is going to increase their risk for metabolic syndrome, diabetes, heart disease. It's going to damage their coronary arteries, cause their body to have a pro-inflammatory state, which I was just reading these articles this week, now can actually, crosses the blood-brain barrier, inflames the brain, and causes much of the depression and anxiety Americans have. It's a combination of the stressors of being in this country, and African Americans have a unique and disproportionate stress based on racism, and then it's combined with the stressors, the nutritional stress, that Columbus's coined term, that the foods give. You've weaponized nutrition in that sense.
So you're so basically weaponizing nutrition is the same as addictive nutrition? Are we saying that they are essentially the same?
No.
Because if they addicted you to high nutrient foods, it wouldn't be weaponized.
So, and let me just jump in for a quick moment, is that anything that's weaponized is something that will cause harm. It's deleterious to your body, right? That's what we infer by being weaponized. And so there's been thought and discussion really regarding what characterizes a food that's been weaponized. Well, it's one that's highly processed. Malcolm brought up that, yes, when you pick a fruit, it's a form of processing when you cut it and so forth. But we're saying about ultra processed. We joke and we say when it melts in your mouth, not in your hands, that's something that's ultra processed, something that is laden with pesticides, something that has what we characterize as a high glycemic index, which means that we say, I don't like to eat sugar, but yet I'll have a white flour product that the body processes immediately, just like it's sugar. It has a high glycemic index, something where the fiber has been taken out, the water has been taken out, both of which describe most of our products that have shelf life on it too as well. These food-like substances, artificial flavors and fillings, but I'm gonna let the expert chime in there.
Okay, also, no, very well, outstanding, very, very well queued up, and you hit it right on the head. In the 1950s, when our current food industry was really kind of taking shape right after World War II, when we had the baby boom, and the suburbs kicked up, and all the products, the products of convenience, the TV dinners and these types of things, they were about shelf life. They were about convenience. So you remove the fiber, you remove particularly the germ from the rice kernel and the oils that are there in order to keep it, so it doesn't oxidative acidity doesn't go rancid. You make the white bread so the bread doesn't mold and it has fewer nutrients, but then you enrich it in order to kind of try to balance that out, whatever the case. But Wonder white bread, which now is it's not good for much, but maybe making glue. So these things weren't created in order to be harmful to people. They were created in order to solve a problem that convenience and then profit. And then later and first people act very confused, like, where's the cancer coming from? We don't know. Now we know. It's a concert of inputs. Something I want to mention quickly, just as we have the opportunity to talk about, we have things that we injectable. These would be medicine. You guys being medical doctors, these medical things, they have pharmaceutical processing is a high level of processing, very thoroughly documented. And that's another conversation around pharmaceuticals, right? So these things are injected into the body. Then we step out of that, and I'm in the food industry where things are put into the body this way, into the gastrointestinal system, which then absorbs them in. So it's another vector of delivery to the body. The next thing is the cosmetic industry, where things are put on the body. Our skin is our largest organ, right? So we're putting things on the face, particularly as we know, our women are very drawn to cosmetics for reasons that we all like. It helps beauty, it enhances appearance, it helps smell, and all these wonderful things. But the ingredients there are often things that you would fall over if you ingested them. But we put them on our skin, and they also, like you mentioned, crossing the brain barrier, Dr. Walsh.
They cross the skin barrier.
Cross the skin barrier, right into the circulatory system. The circulatory system is, slightly can make some differences, but actually the blood moves everywhere, and or choose where something goes. But that's ultimately what's in the blood system. Suddenly is all around your body, and it depends on where it has effect. Okay, and then we have things that go in our environment, in our home environment. So what we call home care products, the things we're cleaning with. So things we're injecting, things we're eating, things we're putting on us, and things we're putting around us. And our level of knowledge around the effect of these things on our body needs to grow. Now, these things were created for convenience, to create this Western world. And what we're realizing is that we thought the Western world was so wise, but it's not using wisdom. It's using greed. It's using effectiveness. It's using efficiency in order to arrive at something where now we need to use our knowledge base. We now need to think this thing through. We need to make better choices. And so we're creating a better society, and it's driven by us. And we have to drive that forward. You follow? I want to take a hot second to toss in a small story where my life changed. And Eric, we had a chance to speak about this. I was in LA working, and I was invited to the Optimal Health Institute in San Diego. I was an omnivore. I was a normal guy. I'm an engineer, travel engineer. So we have these beautiful cars, and I eat whatever I want. And I'm not talking about McDonald's and Burger King. We're choosing what restaurant we're going to. The menu, I'm ordering like a composer. You know, let me have the steak done this way and the slab of ribs done that way, and give me the broccoli, but not heavily, and chop some onions into it for me, a little cracked pepper, and then I want a tea. Do you have any herbal tea? Yeah, bring that as well. For dessert, what do you have? Do you have a brownie? Yeah, let me have 2 scoops of ice cream. And I'm ordering like this because we eat out like this regularly, right? And I'm young, so you load it up. And I remember mentioning deep fried buffalo wings. I get them in Toronto. So it's a restaurant we like to hit when we were in Toronto. That did these deep fried buffalo wings, or buffalo ribs, excuse me, deep fried buffalo ribs. And it was all the fat. You have all this fat on this buffalo, which is very soft for whatever reason, and you deep fry it and then put it as an appetizer. It was delicious, man. But it's like you eat 4 of them, you have a coronary immediately. So this young guy who's eating like this gets invited to the Optimal Health Institute, and that's what I want to bridge into now. It's this thing that sort of rocks it. These guys are raw vegans. So I go from an eat everything lifestyle to I'm invited to go join these raw vegans in this weekend quest thing happen. And suddenly nothing's cooked above 114 degrees. I feel like a squirrel. There's pressed seed cake and lettuce and radishes and watermelon rind juice. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm with all these California guys. And I'm like, okay.
I'm getting hungry.
Oh man. And my meat, the second meal, the first meal I tolerated, and I want to skim through I don't want to take too long on the story, but it's really interesting. The second meal, my meat addiction kicked in, and that's when you realize it's an addiction. I'm looking around the room, and I'm hoping that somebody walks in with chicken. And I would have asked nicely, but if they said no, we would have had a problem. You follow it? No wasn't an option. If someone arrived with chicken, but I was really hoping for that. Inside of me was saying, I need a chicken to go with this. I can eat this squirrel food if I had a good thigh to go with it. Some chicken, right. And I was craving it, and I realized, wow, I'm craving chicken like I would fight someone right now for a thigh if they had it. And I realized that while I was trying to eat this stuff. So the next meal, you go through conscious breathing, and then had some deep tissue massage, and they were doing enemas and all types of stuff. I mean, I'm going through a complete
cleanse,
oil
basically.
change.
Yeah.
A cleanse, right, in one weekend. Food, the whole 9, deep tissue, washed out from the back. You know, you get teeth brushed from the other end. And over 3 days, you caught the joke there. So on Sunday, I'm driving home, and I call my buddy Jason Thomas, who we know, and I say, "Hey, Jason, man, I got a headache. I'm coming from this thing." He said, "Oh, you know, my last name is Spell, man. You went to that? Yeah, man. I'm driving back to LA. My head is killing me, man. So how was it? It was XYZ, all these different things, and my head, I got the splitting headache. And men, we don't tend to get headaches, so I'm wondering." And he says, "You know what? I think you just changed your basal level, of toxins in your body just shifted, and your body's trying to adjust to not being as toxic as it was,
You were going
And
through
I'm like,
withdrawals,
okay,
right? Yeah.
There we go. I get home the next day, and I share the story with Eric. This is now the kicker. This is what happens in Columbus. Dr. Baptiste, you mentioned this. When I had the experience of result of that, the Monday morning, I went to work. I'm sitting at my desk. We had this big open office so everyone can see each other and walking around. One of my colleagues walks up to me. I'm typing. I'm putting my fingers here. So I'm doing this wonderful typing. I took typing in high school, so I have a wonderful form, and I'm hitting all my letters. And I'm doing my good 40 words, right? And my colleague walks up, and I do this. She's talking. She's a marketing person, and we're all driven by marketing. So she wanted to inform me about something, whatever it may have been. And we had a meeting coming up. So they'll do the planning and arrange the thing. So I'm doing this, and I turn to look at her, and I'm still typing. I'm going, okay. And I realize I'm talking to her, and I'm typing without stopping. Now, women do this every day, but men, we don't tend to multitask that well, right? So that's another joke. But
it's the truth, but go ahead. You were saying.
Yeah, I didn't want to laugh because the net might get me.
So I'm doing this, and I'm looking at her, and I realize that I'm like still typing because I'm aware of what I want to say, and it's going, and I'm listening to it at the same time. And I didn't have this ability 4 days ago.
You tapped into the matrix after your cleanse. Huh?
Oh man. And I'm like, yo. So
that's crazy.
Like, I'm still typing, and I'm like, this is wild. And I slow down, and I said, well, let me just listen to her, give her my attention. And I go, okay. And let me get back to this amazing thing I'm doing. Then next, I noticed my thoughts. Some guy on Friday was like, some California guy, yeah, since I've become into optimal health, my thoughts are clearer. And I'm like, too much weed, man. my thoughts are clear right now, dude. California, dude, I'm not sure what you're on, but I'm pretty clear in my thoughts. And right now, I'm ready to go because this watermelon rind juice is killing me. Monday morning, my thoughts were clear like somebody was tapping a chandelier. They were like sparkling thoughts. I mean, they were coming through like they were on a train. I mean, these thoughts were just so rich and clear, and I didn't realize my mind was muddled before. I didn't realize that. So all day I have these crystal clear thoughts. I'm sitting in meetings like it's now inception, right? I'm sitting in meetings like, oh my God, this whole world is richer. Like my thoughts are so clear, my retention is so high. And, so the last thing is I share this story. I hop on the train. I'm living in Los Angeles, so I'm going from downtown LA out to Fontana, which you guys may be aware is about 60 miles. LA is huge, and I was living in Fontana. I take the train out. I call my sister, who's a nutritionist. So get that, right? So I'm talking to my sister going, Leslie, check this out. It's amazing what I just went through. And she's all ears. I get off the train. I'm walking with her, and I can smell Kentucky Fried Chicken, except it wasn't close. And it was about a 40-minute walk, about 2 miles. And I would LA is beautiful weather, especially in the evening. So it was a nice walk. You're just trying to keep yourself up and healthy. Every once in a while, I would take the train. Sometimes I would drive, you know how we do when we're working. So I'm on this 40-minute walk, which is a nice wind down. And I can smell Kentucky Fried Chicken, which isn't close to where I am. It's further up. And I never can smell it from here. Then I can smell the Taco Bell next to it, or the Taco John. And then I can smell this Burger King, and they're all like together. But I wasn't close to them. So I had this super sense of smell. So this day, I'm this super dude.
Your spidey senses, huh?
Because I got cleaned out the weekend, and it changed how I was doing things. And I did exactly what you did, Columbus, what you spoke of. I began to change my ordering. I would ask the guy at these restaurants now, tell me what type of because I look at the salad and go, that's not going to do, because they shifted what I thought was a salad. Because you give me some iceberg lettuce and a cherry tomato and a few grated carrots, and I was good. But at that point, I'm going, no, hey man, my friend, come here. What vegetables do they have in the back? And the waiter goes, I don't know. But because I'm always ordering, I know I can say, hey, I'm right here. Why don't you go ask this chef what he has? He goes, really? Really? Go ask him what vegetables he has. He goes back there. He comes back out. He says he has broccoli, radishes, carrots. Blah, blah. I'm saying, cool. All of those. Leave the arugula out. You know? But I want all of those on my lettuce, on my salad. And he says, I'm sure the chef can do it. He says, and then it's going to cost you extra. I'm like, man, what, $3? $3? $4? $5? It doesn't matter at this point, because I know what happens when I eat like that. I'm going to get amazing senses. My skin's going to clear up. You follow? And so I began to change, and that shifted over time to where now I'm primarily vegetarian. And I just want to share that story as my life-changing story. You follow? And it picked up on some points you guys are making. Yes.
That was awesome. And when he told me that story, I was hoping you would share it tonight. So that's really good.
Okay, well, I'm gonna head out here now, so you guys can go ahead and go into your closing thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Danette. Man, it's incredible conversation. Literally, I know we can't do it, but I could probably continue this conversation at least for almost another hour, in all honesty. But because I know we can't, we're gonna at some point have to bring yeah, for sure. We're going to have to do a part 2 at some point in time to kind of get this back in and do a follow-up at some point in the future. But I want to do a little round robin. First, I want to thank you for your time. And I know that you're on the cusp of nearly midnight where you're at. And I tell you, that's the power of plants, because you look so spry, you look so young and awake. And I mean, there's power in the food you eat. There's power right there. You're testifying to that. So we're appreciative of that. And definitely, and we'll have to connect again later on. But I want to end on this one thing, because it's important for us to always end these on hope. And I want us to think about, if you had the power to change something, right, regarding the food industry and weaponizing nutrition, what would that be? What would that be? And Malcolm, we'll go ahead and we'll start with you if that's okay.
It's okay. It's a pleasure. It would be the produce aisle being given its due. It would be people eating fruits and vegetables. If you can just get people to eat more fruits and vegetables. There's one, my computer's gone down here, and let me see if I can, I'm just log in and see if I'm still connected, and we can get this one slide up that might be of value. I'm not sure if we have the time or not, but I'm not sure what we got happening here.
Well, if you like, while you do that, to pull it, Eric, why don't you jump in and give your final thoughts, and then we'll come back to Malcolm while he pulls up the slide to make his point.
Okay,
I'll be real quick. One of them was sugar and slavery. Somebody put that into the comments, and I think it is very important to point out that extraction of sugar from the cane and that sugar industry that sweetened the tea of the British is also the sugar that fueled in many ways the slave trade. So when we talk about slave food, sugar was a slave food, like legitimately and literally. So that's that's something I wanted to chime in, because somebody said it in the comments. Also want to throw in there something that Atante Myers, who interviewed us last week, did a phenomenal job. She made an incredible a comment that those countries that the government provides insurance are far more protective of the health of their citizens, because it will impact the bottom line of their national budget, because of the National Service Corps in England, or the National Health Services in Canada, or whatever their names are. The government has to look out for the health of their people, because they're going to pay for it in the final analysis. Where in America, instead of the government paying for it, somebody actually profits off of it. If we're unhealthy, pharmaceutical companies, the medical hospital complex, industrial complex, will actually profit off of it. So the different system is part of the reason you have different allowances, because there's just money to be made at every turn. And then in terms of hope, I think what we have to realize, though, is that, as Bob Marley once said, you can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Once you know better, you can actually do better. And so once we know that these things are happening, I think all of us can go back to our families and say, hey, let's eat closer to the beginning of the food chain, a whole food, plant-based diet for life and for health and for spiritual clarity. I'll throw that in there, because that's one of the things that happened with me, is that spiritually I became more clear as well.
Yes, that's huge. Very much, very much. This is my slide coming up here now, I believe. There we go. And you guys may have seen this. It's available. It's publicly available information. This line here is the Dietary Guideline recommendation. So this line going, if you can see the mouse moving across the middle there. And what we have here are different food groups so that we eat. So we have meat, eggs, and nuts. In 1970, this is what people generally consumed. In 2017, this is the level of this grouping that people consume. So the recommended intake was at 100%. In essence, we consumed about 125% of what was recommended in 1970. In 2017, people are consuming about 140% of what's recommended in meat, eggs, and nuts. And you know that nuts probably aren't much of that. It's mainly meat and eggs. People are consuming about 140% of what's recommended. When I say people, I'm speaking of Americans. Relative to grain, in respect to grains, in 1970, we consumed about 70% of what was recommended, or 80, excuse me, of what was recommended for grain consumption. Grain has been pushed, whole wheat bread, whole grain. So this is kind of there for us. Muffins and things are available, whether they're blueberry muffins or what they might be. you follow what I'm speaking to, these grains are now largely available, and we're eating about 110% of what's recommended with the dietary guideline. So meat, eggs, and grains, we're eating above what's recommended for the dietary guideline, current dietary guideline. With respect to vegetables, in 1970, we were at 60% of what's recommended for vegetable intake. And today we're at 70% of what's recommended, still falling short. And this is sort of to the answer, the question of what you were asking. I would want increased vegetable consumption, where we were actually at 100% or at 140% of our vegetable intake, which is
But
what we get.
how much of that vegetable is ketchup and potatoes? The government actually includes both of those as a vegetable, and I think that's part of the danger. And even with the increased grains, how much is that processed breads and grains and not whole grains?
A lot of it. A lot of it. You're 100% correct. Awesome. Very, very good catch.
Yeah.
And here we have the dairy. Dairy has decreased slightly, and I like to say that cow milk is for cow babies. You follow? And then we just let it be that way. You know, the cow baby should have cow milk. We walk away from that. But as you may know, I'm sure you guys know that dairy products, there's an opiate metabolite that in the metabolism.
Casomorphones. Yep.
There we go. There's something called nutrient metabolism, where we understand how nutrients are metabolized in the body, and these tend to be cycles. So our bodies have a lot of cycles that run through, and something can enter the cycle at different points of access, and you have it might not be, well, something can enter that cycle and throw it off or fit into that cycle. And so we have these opiate-like compounds in dairy that cause cheese to be addictive, actually addictive, you know, not just lightly addictive. I mean, people will you know, to get cheese, or if you tell them they're not going to have cheese, I mean, that really is a non-starter. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So then we have fruit here, which is then lower. So I just wanted to sort of share this slide because I think it spoke directly to this conversation. And we have this large gap here to where we're just eating just below 40% of what's recommended for us to intake. And I think if we close this gap with fruit and we close this gap with vegetables, we would see a lot of our issues that we're seeing medically reduced. So inflammation, a lot of the pain in our joints. I was a basketball player in my youth. I've had surgery on both sides, both knees. My knees, and I'm going to be honest, I'm 49. My knees feel better at 49. So I guess we're all similar age, right? So my knees feel better now than they did when I was in my 20s. Inflammation is so much lower. My fingers feel better. My knuckles barely crack now, where I used to be able to crack my knuckles before, but inflammation is so low. I could begin to talk. I used to wear glasses. All the way through grad school until 28, I carry glasses around. I haven't worn them in the past 20 years. My eyes have gotten better. I don't have 20/20 vision, but I also don't require glasses through the day. You follow? There's so many things that adjust as we adjust ourselves. If this makes sense. With that, I'm going to step back a little bit from the.
Absolutely. I'll close things up with my perspective as well as, you know, I think if I could change one thing about the food industry and the weaponization of food is I would want to level the playing field. And what I mean by that is that subsidies would be equally distributed, if not eliminated, to the refined food products, the dairy and the corn to lead to all those products, and the soy, but it would be equally distributed to broccoli and to kale and to arugula and things of that nature. And so then that way the price point would be lowered. And so there will be a sense of it being more affordable and readily available. The other thing that leveling means is the fact that advertisement will be equal. So what's interesting is there was a study done out of New Haven, and this is close to heart for you, Eric, out there in Connecticut. And what they did is that they actually did a campaign, and they took the lead advertisers for broccoli. And what they said is you know, we want you to create a campaign for broccoli. So they created this campaign for broccoli, and they pitted broccoli versus kale to stimulate conversation. Search it up on YouTube. It's a great little video that's very cute. And what these students from New Haven did was they took these advertisements and the billboards into urban communities and food deserts and food swamps, and they saw an astronomical increase in broccoli consumption, right? When you put it in front of people. And so there is huge power in terms of advertisement that shapes our actions on the subconscious level. And so I believe there has to be this movement, because you said it earlier. And I'm not sure if folks out there caught what you said. The industry will move according to the demands of the consumers. If the consumers demand healthier products, they will move. There means that there's that at the end of the day, business is business is business. Money is money is money.
Yes.
And there's power behind money where you choose to spend those dollars. And part of this is giving hope that, yes, just like a singular vote on an election night, a singular vote with your dollar, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. And I think that's the thing that we need to encourage. And even if in our lifetime we don't see it, we may see it in our kids' lifetime, that there's huge transformations based on the dollars and where we spend things right now. So we have to maintain hope. And that's really what the Slave Food Project is about. It's hope for all of us, Black, brown, white, yellow, green, across the board, with the intention looking at what is ailing our community and Black and brown communities specifically right now is the point. So, man, Malcolm, once again, I have enjoyed this conversation with you, and Eric, as always,
Phenomenal, phenomenal,
yes,
Malcolm. Phenomenal.
Yes.
Pleasure.
And so
we will definitely have you back on, man, because we didn't even scratch the surface tonight. I mean, we got to the case of morphones when we were done. So we got to have you back on.
Right. That will be a pleasure. Great pleasure.
We will definitely do that. And to the folks out there who are following us, continue to follow, continue to like us at Slave Food on Facebook. Go to the YouTube, share it, please share it. Get it out there for people to watch. Go to the Slave Food Project on YouTube and catch us next week. We're going to be back next week, and we have a couple of special guests for us. We're going to have Chef Babette, as well as we're planning on having Eric Adams, Borough President Eric Adams, next week. So do not miss a powerful
Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Of Brooklyn. You can't leave out Brooklyn. And of course, Chef Babette, for those of you who don't know, is the owner of Stuff I Eat. One of the top vegan restaurants on the West Coast, right by LAX in Inglewood, Black owned. You don't want to miss that one. And her story of her health transformation, as well as the borough presidents, is going to blow your mind.
Absolutely. Taste of freedom. They're going to give you a taste of freedom of what you can. Well, we got insight into it with Malcolm.
We sure did with Malcolm.
We got insight into That's right. But we're going to get another full taste of it next week, and so we're looking forward to that. So meet us back, same place, same time.
Outstanding.
Thanks again.
All right. Good night.